What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Major Mixtape Podcast. I'm your host, Jason. Hope you're doing well whenever and wherever you are watching or listening to this episode. Now, we're at the holiday season, and we have a very, very special treat because joining us on the show today is Beth Kowaleski. She is the president of the Music Therapy Association of Ontario. Julia, welcome to the show. How are you today?
Hi, Jason. Thanks for having me. I'm doing very well. Thank you.
Now, for anyone who has never heard of the Music Therapy Association of Ontario, what does the MTAO do?
So the Music Therapy Association of Ontario is basically serves as a unifying body for music therapists in Ontario. And that means a few different things. It looks different. There's a few things that we do. So, for example, we run events for music therapists, such as continuing education events, conferences, support groups, that kind of thing. We also work on connecting the public to music therapists. So we have a few ways to do that on our website. So you can either find a therapist by their area or by their population. Or you can put out a general referral that gets sent to all our therapists that are a member of our association. And then they'll contact you if they, can work with you based on what you defined in that request.
Now, for anyone who's never actually heard of music therapy, can you kind of just give us a breakdown of some of the areas that music therapy can help with people?
Yeah, so music therapy can be used for a wide range of needs. I mean, you'll see music therapists, around the world from, prisons, schools, hospitals, palliative care, early childhood education, all sorts of things. And you can use music for all sorts of diagnosis as well. Because we know it does great things in the brain and stimulates the brain differently than other medians. So, we work with, kids with autism, different developmental delays, stroke, rehabilitation for any type of brain injury, and as well as mental health and that sort of thing.
When it comes to how the brain works, you often get that left side, right side debate as to which is the more analytical and which is the more creative. When listening to music, what parts of the brain are you actually activating?
Well, it depends on how you use some music. So, for example, how detailed you want to get into it, but music can potentially, activate all areas of the brain. We know that rhythm, for example, can activate your motor neurons. It can activate speech areas and things like that. So it really can activate any side. And even we see, if somebody has a stroke on one side of the brain, you can actually use music to help the brain find new pathways around the damaged area to, relearn skills that were lost. So it's kind of hard to say the left or right because it does compass all areas of the brain.
Now, you've mentioned before, like a lot of people kind of lean on music as well. So the concept of music therapy shouldn't necessarily be that foreign a concept to people who traditionally go to, they're feeling down or if they need to pick me up, they'll lean towards music. But it's a bit more than that, isn't it?
Right. Yeah. So, even in history, David in the Bible, used music for his mental health and things like that. In Canada, we have in order to be a certified music therapist, you do have to go through a certain level of training. So you have to have a degree in music therapy. That could be a bachelor's of music therapy or a master's of music therapy. And then you have to do 1,000-hour internship. And then after that, you have to do a board certification exam and you have to hand in a file with a bunch of paperwork and hope you pass everything. And then you become a certified music therapist. And we have continuing education as part of that process too. So, every 5 years you have to do a minimum amount of hours. And that's so that we're staying on top of, best practice, so that we can really help our clients. And I mean, one thing that when we're trained and stuff, you learn the benefits, which there are a lot of benefits of using music, but you also, learn about the negative side as well, which I find like a lot of people use music, which is great. Like anyone can use it, but you have to be aware of the good and the bad when you're working with vulnerable people.
When studying to become a music therapist, how much of that study involves music therapy? How much of it involves neurology? How much involves psychology? I'm just curious, what goes into the process of becoming a licensed certified music therapist as far as the schooling aspect goes?
Right. So each school in Canada kind of has a different way, a different approach. So for example, Wilfrid Laurier has more of a psychotherapy approach. And in that you do, psychology courses as well as specific music therapy courses, improvisation. And obviously for all the schools, you have to have a minimum music requirement. So you have to be able to get into music school. So, be at that grade 10 level to get in the first place. And then there's other schools like at the University of Toronto, they focus on neurologic music therapy. So there's more courses in like rehabilitation science and that type of thing. And then you have Capilano, which is more, I'm not sure if it's quite psychotherapy, but leaning more towards that way. So there's quite a mix of, in Canada, the type of trainings that you can get, but they all have the core foundation that you have to be able to manipulate music. So you have to be a great musician, because if you can't use your tool, then, you're not, probably won't be very good. And then, understanding the type of clients. So if that's in a psychotherapy way or in a neurologic impairment way, that's what you'll focus on.
That was one of the things I was very curious about, is how much musicianship is involved, because yourself, you are a pianist, guitarist, harmonica, trombone, like there's a wide range of instruments that you can play. How wide a musical talent do you need in order to be able to start going down this path?
I think the level of your musicianship has to be very high. And you can see even some other countries have different levels, and you can see the difference in the quality of work when there's not that high level. And the reason being is because if you don't know how to manipulate music to meet your client's needs, whether that's being something simple, or sometimes you get clients who are full-blown musicians and anything besides perfection, will be traumatizing to them depending on their state. Then you won't really be able to, do justice to your work. So level of musicianship is very, very high, and flexibility. So that's why most, all programs in Canada, you have to do improvisation, because you have to know how to think on your feet and how to respond to whatever information you're getting. And then in terms of like range of instruments, you're expected to use your voice. You're expected to know, piano skills, guitar skills. My main instrument is actually trombone. So that's what I went to school for initially. But then you have to pick up things as well. So for example, if you're a traveling music therapist going into people's homes, you probably can't carry your piano. So you have to find other instruments that work, or maybe, you're dealing with physical disabilities where a piano and guitar will not be a great option. So you have to find maybe some percussion instruments that would work, and also working with the preference of the individuals that you're working with. Because if you can use the types of instruments, if you're using instruments that they like, then it can be more motivating for them.
When going through and figuring out which music to use, depending on the client or whoever's going through the therapy session, how much of it is tempo, how much of it is instrumentation, and then how much of it is even frequency? Because there have been articles out there where the standard concert A is about 440 hertz, but yet there have been studies that say a 433 hertz A is a much more soothing sound. How in depth into selecting the music do you get?
I think different music therapists will have different perspectives on this. So for me, what I find to be the core, and I come from the neurologic music therapy background. So rhythm is kind of the main component that you look at altering, because it can, change arousal states. It can change motor movements, cognitive things as well. In terms of like specific pitches, to be honest, there's not a whole lot of great research about specific pitches. In terms of when thinking about what pitches to use, I mean, if you're going to be using a vocal piece, it has to be in the range. If your client's going to be singing it, you have to be aware of auditory sensitivities if somebody has those. So making sure that you're in a range where they're not going to be overstimulated or understimulated.
Given everything that basically the world has gone through in the last year and a half, obviously the pandemic has wreaked havoc on a lot of people, both physically and mentally. Have you noticed in the past 18, 19 months that a lot more people have reached out to the MTAO in order to seek help or in order to find something that will kind of help them get through all of this?
Yeah, we've definitely seen an increase. I know music therapists with their businesses are, saying that they're having more requests for services, and we're seeing a huge increase in being able to meet the needs of secluded communities. So even northern communities and things like that, because people are able to do things virtually, and now they're getting the resources so that they can actually access virtual resources. We're seeing a huge increase in that. Also, yeah, a lot of people are struggling. So the isolation piece, needing support that way, and just, without, even if you think of like long-term care, where if they're not doing things daily, they can decline quite quickly. So it's really important. And music therapy is one of those things that is still accessible, online, if possible. And it can still really provide benefits. And even I think of some of my own work with group homes, where these adults have maybe been quite secluded in their house. I do run some programs where I can actually have, multiple houses together, on Zoom. So they get those, we work on a lot of physical things because they're not going out and doing things. So we do that. But then there's also the social connection aspect, and getting to see people that they know online on the other side and doing something productive together.
Given the need for a lot of things to go virtual, do you find it harder or easier to get to the individual because of the need to be, basically over the internet?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's quite the spectrum. There's in some ways, being virtual is easier for a lot of people. I mean, one example of that is, some adults with autism, have difficulty with someone being in their space or going into someone else's space. So you could have, 6 to 8 weeks where they're just getting used to you being in their space. Whereas when when you're online, they have no adjustment period to that. But then you got the flip side where some people won't engage over a screen. So if they're not allowed to do in person and they don't engage over the screen, it's, you know, it's kind of like, well, that's too bad for you. Like, you know, or young children, it can be a little more difficult to engage on over the screen as well. On the flip side, parents are much more involved if they're going to do something online, which I love to see. In my practice, we try and include family as much as possible. So I actually like that aspect that the parent is there and like, you know, helping everything, and they get the session agenda and know exactly what we're working on. And then, you know, hopefully work on it outside the session as well, since they know exactly what they're doing. So yeah, there is very good and not so good aspects of that.
One of the misconceptions as far as music therapy goes is that someone has to have, you know, instruments at home or some way to be able to be musical. But when dealing with, say, young children, that's not necessarily the case. How can the simplest of instruments, something as simple as a shaker, be utilized in music therapy for younger kids?
Yeah, so I mean, a shaker can be used so many ways. When I first started practicing, I thought I would have a bunch of instruments at the place I was working, and all I had was 10 shakers. So I really had to learn how to use the shaker. But I mean, you know, you can do things, for example, like working on inhibition. So being able to stop, you know, stop yourself from doing something and going. So also, you know, listening to instructions and stuff like that. You can do that with a shaker. You know, stop shaking. And it's great auditory feedback because they know if they've stopped or not. You know, you can also, it provides that kind of feed forward loop if you're doing a movement. So, you know, shaking in front of you, shaking behind you, within the structure of a song, obviously. So providing that that loop so they can, it helps support movement. Yeah, so that's just like a couple, you know, practical ways. And I know there's, you know, some groups that they want to do music therapy. They don't have they don't have instruments at home, or it might be a wide range of people. They don't know what people have at home. So, you know, my instructions will be find a box or a bowl, a wooden spoon, or a stick from outside. You know, for a shaker, you can find a bag of coffee beans, or, you know, a container with rice, that kind of thing. So it really is accessible, even if you don't have instruments at home. And a lot can be done with those simple type of homemade instruments.
Now, coming up in February of 2022, on February 26th, is the 2022 annual conference in the AGM. So what is involved in all of that?
So the AGM and conference is a really great day. There's a few different aspects that are involved with that. So we have, you know, research elements. So music therapists in Ontario can share what research they've been working on, and things like that. Then we also try and have, you know, time to socialize. So connecting with other music therapists, seeing what type of work is, you know, people are doing and how we can inspire and share ideas. And then, I mean, it's great for people who are not music therapists as well. We always get quite a group of people who aren't music therapists, but are just interested in music therapy. And they always learn a lot as well. And you can really see in Ontario, especially, we have such a wide range of people working in different areas. I mean, each year is very different. So in terms of, you know, what people are speaking about and things like that.
One of the things that's on the schedule is the fireside chat. Is just some of the papers and some of the studies that are going on. How much of a learning experience is this? Not just for current music therapists who are attending the conference virtually, but people who are interested in music therapy, people who are interested in just music study in general. How much of a learning opportunity is this for people?
I think it's a huge learning opportunity. It's a different perspective than you'll hear from like media and mainstream news articles. And the fact that, you have the opportunity to ask questions, you can kind of, ask the questions around the areas that interest you more. And it's one day, but you learn so much.
Now, this is the holiday season, and there are ways that people can help fund and donate to the MTAO. What are some of the ways that people can help out?
Well, there's a couple ways. So on our website, we do have a donate page. So you can donate that way. We are also constantly looking for businesses in the community to partner with that can provide, we call them membership perks, but basically things that music therapists could use in their practices. So for example, Cosmos Music gives us a discount to instruments, and we have, a discount to printing because we have to make posters and print and things like that. We have one business who gives us discount to candles, which might, help set the mood in your office. So that's, one of the other ways that we look to connect.
This is the Major Mixtape Podcast. Our guest today, Julia Kowaleski. She is the president of the Music Therapy Association of Ontario. We're going to step away for just a moment. When we come back, we're going to learn a little bit more about Julia. You've heard it all before. Waste of film. Dumpster fire. How did this even get made? Train wreck. Total garbage. Snooze fest. Utterly painful. Worst film ever. But is it really? The show is called It's Not That Bad, and we dare to look at the lowest rated shows and movies and see only the good things. We're looking for A grades in B movies. It's Not That Bad. Listen now, wherever you get your podcasts. Welcome back to the Major Mixtape Podcast. Our guest today, Julia Kowaleski, the president of the Music Therapy Association of Ontario. Now, Julia, aside from being the president of the MTAO, you're also the founder of Julia's Place. So was this the big launch into really delving into music therapy for you?
It wasn't actually. It was kind of my second launch. So my career started after I finished my training I moved to the Caribbean actually. So I spent 6 years there on the island of Antigua. And I started working at a private school. So I established a special needs program in that school, which was kind of the first of its kind on the island, and also taught music classes. But it was really a unique opportunity because I made music therapy, an integral part of the program, where it wasn't just like you go for 45 minutes and then you go back to your regular classroom. It's like we used music all throughout the day to accomplish like every type of academic goal and social goal you could think of. So it was very interesting. So I worked at that school for 2 years, and then started incorporating a private practice of my own, where I started working with government schools, providing music therapy as well as privately in my own studio. And I did some work with some of the Peace Corps volunteers that were on the island. So providing training workshops for school teachers about how to deal with special needs, or how to identify, when someone might have, attention difficulties that's interrupting their learning, and just giving some basic strategies about how to deal with that. And we also did a lot of training for kind of the teens and young adults about different diagnoses and special needs. And they would then go and work in the camp that we ran at the school. for children with special needs. And so that way they could learn about these differences, which wasn't really a part of the culture there yet. So making them aware of that and how to deal with it. So that was very, very interesting. Then I moved back to Canada, did my master's because I was really interested I saw all these changes in my clients despite their diagnosis, but they're all having these great changes. And I wanted to see, why are they all making progress? What's happening in the brain to make these changes. So I went and did my master's at the University of Toronto, and then started Julia's Place after that.
How much of a culture shock was there going from Canada to Antigua and then back? Like, how was music therapy there in comparison to here?
There was a huge culture shock, and probably the reverse culture shock was bigger than the initial culture shock going there. And I realized, because I was there for 6 years, it took a solid 2 years to really understand the culture, and for even people to see me as someone who is there to help them, and not just because they did have like Peace Corps workers and stuff like that. They come for their year and then they leave, kind of thing. So to kind of be recognized as someone who's there to help them longer term, and not just give things to help in the moment. And I would say the hugest difference there is that there's no closed doors, whereas here, when even in my initial training, it's like kind of the whitish walls, nothing distracting. Nobody can hear the sound that you're making, and you can't hear anyone else's sound from the hallway. Whereas there, the walls are just board. Most of the time, all the doors and windows are open because it's so hot. There would be times where, the kid I'm working with, it was just best to be outside. And even you would have people, they would hear you doing music and they would come on in, do a little dance and then leave. And, it was just totally different. So when I came back here and I wanted to start my own practice, I wanted to have elements of that. So for example, our studios are always in a house setting. And that's also why I called it Julia's Place. So rather than kids thinking they're going to a clinic or a hospital, they would say, well, we're going to Julia's Place. That's the idea. I don't know if people actually say that, but that was my thinking. Okay, we're going to Julia's Place. And, like one of my spaces, it didn't have doors. And so, parents would be like, oh no, like, what if they run around? I'm like, that's okay. That's totally fine. We can run around. And before COVID, the space I had, animals and stuff as well. So even if someone wasn't comfortable coming in the house, we would just go outside, walk around. I would maybe carry my glockenspiel and start interacting that way. But yeah, it's really interesting too, because on the island there wasn't a lot of resources. So for example, there's no speech therapists. So if there was something that needed to be worked on, I had to figure it out. Otherwise, there was no one to, help. And whereas here, it's like music therapy is the afterthought if nothing else worked. So it was hard to get used to that, because I was used to, either I figure it out, and I would get people from Canada, like different professionals. I would send videos if I didn't know what was going on, or, if they had any feedback, because a lot of the people didn't even have diagnosis. So I'd say, what do you think's going on here? Because then I can try and figure out how to help people. But yeah, here it's music therapy is the afterthought, which when you think about how powerful music therapy can be, it should be one of the primary, healthcare tools. But
for parents who may be listening to this, parents with, kids with special needs, when should they turn to music therapy for their kids, or even for themselves? Like, at what point, does someone need to sit there and say, maybe this is a good avenue to go down?
I mean, I say at any point, like the earlier the better, especially if it's with children, early intervention is best. And yeah, I know some people say, oh, well, I'm not into music, I don't like singing. Well, you don't have to sing. Just think as if, it's the same as if you go to physio and, they're going to make you do your exercises. A music therapist can have the same structure where you're doing these exercises because it's good for your brain, because it's good for your mental health. You don't have to be emotionally attached to it all the time and things like that. So yeah, I would say any time's a good time.
For yourself, what was it that inspired you to want to get into and study music therapy?
Well, initially it was just I wanted to do something with music because it was my interest and I wanted to help people. So as a teenager, that was my motivation for going into music therapy. Also, I did one of those grade 10 career tests, and the first option was fashion designer, which I clearly don't care about fashion or sewing or any type of thing. And the second thing was music therapist. So I did my research based off that, and that's decided I was going to do it, and that's what I do.
How accomplished of a musician were you when you decided to go down that music therapy road?
At that point, I was working on my grade 9 piano. I was fairly new at trombone. I had just started it in grade 9. So when I was 14, I decided to use trombone as my main instrument just because I really enjoyed playing in bands and stuff like that. So I spent, 2 years taking lessons and really focusing on that. And I think when you're older and you decide that you're going to do something and you put the time in, like you can do it. So it's not like you need, to be a concert pianist since the age of 3. If that's what you want to do, and you can learn in a shorter amount of time, or sometimes people took an extra year to just practice before going to music school. Yeah.
As you got into studying music therapy and eventually become an accredited music therapist, did it change the way you, as just a musician or even a music, appreciation person, appreciated music or just listening to it? Did it change the way you listened to and chose the music that you listened to?
I think in some ways it did. I now listen to simpler things, whereas before my music therapy training, like I was actually into like kind of like heavy metal and like analyzing the riffs and that kind of thing. And then once I started my music training and you analyze even more, like I just wanted, when I listened to something for my own pleasure, I just wanted simple things, nothing complicated. So
there comes a point in everyone's life when they actually go to the record store and buy that first album for themselves. Now that you've mentioned heavy metal, now I'm very, very curious. Do you remember what that first album was that you bought for yourself with your own money?
Oh, with my own money, it would have been not heavy metal, but it was 1,000 Foot Crutch.
Okay.
I listened to a lot of little bands, like local bands. So 1,000 Foot Crutch would have been the first album that I bought.
But one of the things you also mentioned earlier too was that you enjoyed playing in bands, and I know there are some videos out there of you performing, including one with an original composition with you on trombone and with a drummer. So how much do you still take the opportunity to perform and write music?
I do write still regularly. it's, a good way to kind of get your thoughts out and process things that you're going through. So I guess in that way, that's how I use music therapy on myself. And then I love playing out. So when I was in Antigua, I was in steel pan band. I played trombone in the calypso bands for Carnival. And I'm also a member of the Antigua and Barbuda Defense Force. So I play with them. And since moving back to Canada, it's been a little bit trickier because I have a child. So I have to balance the time with that. So now mostly I play like within my church. But I do that fairly regularly. So I do enjoy that. And I like playing with people. I'm not so much of a soloist, although I'll do like a coffee house, or I don't even know if people are doing those anymore, but when they were, I was doing those.
It's often said that when musicians play together, everyone kind of gets on that same mental wave. Like there's that unspoken communication, and everyone can kind of feel when the changes are coming. It's almost like an invisible connection. How real is that, and is that noticeable from a neurological standpoint?
So it is obviously noticeable. I'm not too sure actually what is happening neurologically within that group. I do know there is some research, but it's been a while since I looked at it, so I don't want to say anything and then it not be correct. There is some, especially at Laurier, they did some with string quartets, and just what's going on with them, even matching their body movements and things like that. So I can't speak too much to that, but there is some sort of connection and some research on that can be looked up.
That, of course, brings us to the big question of the podcast. So if you, Julia, had to introduce yourself to a total stranger, but instead of saying, "Hi, I'm Julia," you hand them a mixtape. And on that tape are songs that tell the story of you. What songs are on that tape, and why are those songs there?
Interesting question. So I would say probably "Keep Your Head Up," Andy Grammer, because I mean, it's a song about staying positive and having fun, even during the bad times. So I really enjoy that and find it. I've kind of listened to it for quite a number of years, and then another one would be "In Christ Alone." There's a good Owl City. So as a Christian, it's a good reminder for me of where to put my faith, not in myself, in Christ alone. And then finally, I would say all glory be to Christ, because whether it's good or bad in my life, all the glory goes to God. And that's my beliefs, and that would be my mixtape.
For anyone who's listening to this episode right now, and they're either considering following your path and becoming a music therapist, or they're interested and they want to see if music therapy is right for them, what would you say to those people?
I would say do some research. So, if you're interested career-wise, take a look at different schools, reach out and talk to music therapists, because I love to talk about music therapy, and most of us do like to talk about. So you could even reach out to someone in your local area. If you're interested in yourself, again, I say do some research, because like with any field or specialist, you don't always connect to the first one you meet. So for example, with your doctors, sometimes you don't work well with the first doctor, but then the next doctor will be great. So just keep that in mind, that there's a wide range of therapists that deal with a wide range of issues in a wide range of ways. So if you want to try it out, you tried it out once and you don't think it's for you, I would recommend trying it out again, trying somebody else, maybe asking a few more questions, and yeah, finding someone who's the right fit for you.
Julia, thank you so much for this. For anyone who is curious, where can they find the Music Therapy Association of Ontario?
You can find us on our website, which is musictherapyontario.com, I think. Or you can Google that and that will come up. We also have Facebook and Instagram that you can follow us.
Julia, thank you for this. And to our listeners, thank you for listening to this edition of the Major Mixtape Podcast. Now, if you're listening to us in an audio streaming service, you can watch this entire interview over on YouTube. But if you are watching this on YouTube right now, you can download and listen to this episode on the go wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jason. This is the Major Mixtape Podcast. Until next time, take care.